Welcome back to the ACCN podcast. I'm your host, Shivani.
And I'm Cassandra. And today we have Wangari, our co-host and partner.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here again.
Great. And today we are joined by Rebecca Mincy, the investment director at the Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund. And she will be talking to us about investing in the climate space. Rebecca, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
Cool. So, Rebecca, do you want to introduce yourself and your fund and what you do?
Happily. So I'm Rebecca Mincy. I'm the investment director for ARAF. That's what we call our fund. And essentially, we invest at the intersection of climate change and agriculture. We focus on investing in fast-growing agribusinesses that help smallholder farmers adapt to climate change. So what does that mean, essentially? So we're focusing on companies that help farmers become better farmers in the context of a changing climate. We don't necessarily play in the CO2 emissions reduction space. There are plenty of other partners that do that, and we're grateful for that. But by and large, we're working with companies that work directly with farmers that help them to have the knowledge, the stuff, and the financial products that they need in order to become more climate resilient. We started in 2019, and so far we've invested in 13 companies. We only invest equity, so that means we take an ownership stake in businesses. Our typical ticket size is $1 to $2 million that we'll invest upfront. We can go for smaller companies, which we've done, but we start still at about $300,000, which is not a small amount. So the company would need to have some traction, and we go to maybe as much as $4 million for the companies that maybe are a bit more mature. If you're listening to this from Kenya, maybe some of the companies that you might recognize are Sun Culture. They sell solar irrigation solutions to smallholder farmers across East and West Africa. And maybe you've also heard of Victory Farms, which is a tilapia company. Maybe some of you actually buy tilapia from Victory Farms. So we're also investors there. But we have invested in tomato processing companies in Nigeria. We've invested in insurtech companies in West Africa, as well as irrigation as a service companies in East Africa. So we're kind of all over the place in terms of the types of companies that we invest in, but we're very narrow in our focus that they have to work with smallholder farmers and they have to help them to adapt to climate change.
Great. I think that's such a fantastic conversation, Rebecca, because you are the money lady from what I'm hearing. I've just heard millions of this and millions of that, and that gets me very excited because in this space, it's very hard to access financing, especially for small companies and for indigenous companies. So it's great to hear your reach across the continent. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, you said you invest 100% equity.
Yeah.
That is very rare. Can you tell us more around that decision and why not ask the companies to take on debt as well or have their own initial investment?
Yeah. So basically, oftentimes companies, especially early stage companies, they can't afford debt. So, and by afford debt, what I mean is they often don't have the collateral that like banks and other lenders want them to put up. They don't own land, they don't own buildings. And so it's actually quite burdensome. The bar is quite high to take on debt in many of these markets. Moreover, the interest rate is incredibly high. We're looking at interest rates anywhere from, I would say, 13 to 18%. And sometimes they're not in the local currency. They're in dollars or euros or pounds. And when you think about the difference in the currencies and how currency moves, it's incredibly expensive from a debt standpoint. So we come in with an equity investment. It's, an ownership. We join your board. We hope to be strategic partners for you. So it is quite kind of affordable in some ways. For the companies that we work with to take on equity. However, as companies become larger, they do take on debt. I would say right now about easily a third to almost half of our companies probably have some level of debt, primarily for something called working capital. Right. So that is a part of the mix of funds. But I would be remiss if I didn't include many of our companies also have some sort of grant. So it's very much a blended financing market that we see with some of these climate-focused companies. I think in short, we're here for it all. Each has its own purpose. Equity has purpose, debt has purpose, grant has purpose. And I think for us, as long as we, are clear that equity is being used to grow the business, for example. Debt is being used to make infrastructure or what we call capital expenditure purchases. And grants maybe are used for like super innovative things that haven't quite proven themselves out commercially. Right. Then we're completely fine with a capital structure that blends all these different forms of capital.
And you said something interesting, that you invest in companies that have traction. So I hear this all the time, like a company needs traction to be able to attract investment.
Yep.
What does that traction look like? What does it look like?
So one of the easiest metrics is revenue. But it's not the only thing that we look at. But traction shows to us that you have created a product that people are willing to pay for. And that's fundamentally it's key from a commercial standpoint, because we want our businesses to grow and scale and make more products and expand across different geographies. So that consummation, if you will, that product market fit is really, really important. Because we are only agriculture investors, like we don't do health, we don't do energy, we don't do education, we have a pretty deep knowledge of what farmers want, what they'd be willing to pay for, even the price point, where they go for their shopping, what sort of risk profile they're looking for in their products and services. And so you don't always have to have proven the traction at scale for us to understand whether or not you have something that's really commercially viable. Right. But the flip side, let's say, for example, you are you're starting something. What gives an investor comfort is if you have a track record for execution in this market. So maybe it's your second company, for example, because it can be very challenging to deliver a product or service when you have things like floods and blackouts.
Yes, and you don't know how to
poor roads,
work through it,
and things like that. It can be very, very tricky to continue to execute at a high level when you have, just some of the challenges that we all live with and work with every day. And so, if you have run a business before, that gives investors confidence that you can do it again. Even if it's with a slightly different idea in mind. And so, traction is just one of the ways that investors try to get comfortable with their investments or potential investments. Because we're investors, we're risk takers, so there's never certainty that a company's going to grow big and be super profitable, but we do look for comfort along the way. So in the absence of traction, we look for comfort in the track record of the entrepreneur.
And in your line of investment, I know you mentioned it kind of meets between agriculture and climate. Mm-hmm. What are some interesting trends you're seeing in terms of organizations that are coming up, people starting up businesses to address both?
Some of the ones that look really promising are things that provide what we call a bundle set of solutions to farmers. So not just, let me offtake your maize and soya, but let me put my arm around your entire farming experience. So let me work with you on inputs. Let me provide you some credit. Let me do training for you and provide guaranteed market offtake. So those business models are always very interesting. But some of the things that are super interesting are, I would say some of the insurance products that are out there that are using satellite data to understand what's happening on the ground and make predictions about weather using historical information. We just invested in a company called Ibiza that is in fact doing just that, to provide low-cost insurance to smallholder farmers. So in the event that the rains wash away your crops, you do have some recourse in terms of insurance. Only about 5% of farmers have crop insurance right now. Yeah. And so that is an area that we are keen to invest in and see spread across sub-Saharan Africa. I think the other thing that we are always looking for are water management solutions. Most farming here is rain-fed, and so that means when the rains don't come, there's a problem. And so right now we've invested in a company called Stable Foods that's doing irrigation as a service. So farmers can pay for what they need. It's a drip irrigation solution that is networked to a solar water solution. And so we're excited. It's super tiny, but we think that it can scale. And when it does scale, it'll almost look like a mini grid, but for water.
Yeah.
And in that way, like, that's super interesting to us because some of the water management solutions that are out there, they're really expensive. And so if we can find something that is at the right price point and is reliable and is fit for purpose from a smallholder farmer standpoint, we think that that could be very interesting. So I would say things that de-risk farming. So maybe you were hoping I would say like something like ag tech or AI.
No, I don't think this.
No. That is, I mean, we're seeing more solutions there, but it's still super early days.
Yeah.
We've seen some interesting models around vertical farming, for example, that has a little bit more kind of sexiness to it. We've seen some interesting models around aquaponics and hydroponics, super interesting, but highly technical.
Right.
And so there's a bit of a lift in terms of training and education and things like that. I think those things are coming, but I would still give it a couple of years. And unfortunately, we don't have a couple of years. We need our farming yields to go up. Yeah. You know, we need that market offtake. We need to move crops across, you know, multiple geographies, not just Kenya, but also all of East Africa. So I'm hopeful that some of those solutions will become a little bit more fit for purpose for this market.
Right.
But until then, we're looking for bundle solutions. We're looking for water management solutions, things that really de-risk farming, but always ensure that there is a kind of a pot at the end of the rainbow, meaning that there is a market for whatever farmers are growing. So I think some of those things are really interesting for us.
I'm curious, when you mentioned all of these cool solutions, are they solutions that are only specific to East Africa or solutions specific to West Africa, or are you seeing trends that are specific to regions, or are these trends just across sub-Saharan Africa?
So far, these are trends across sub-Saharan Africa. And we focus, right now we invest in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria, and Ghana. And these are places where there are smallholder farmers, so not commercial farmers, but smallholder farmers are generating the majority of the food. And what we found is that smallholder farmers are really not that different. Between East Africa, West Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, they're not that different. And so we look for products and services that are scalable across different geographies, because what we hope is that we may start in Kenya today, but we'll be looking at 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 countries down the road.
Okay. And right now you're only in Kenya, or?
No, so right now across the 13 companies that we've invested in, we are in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria, and Ghana. But even in those investments, we have exposure to places like Benin, Togo, Ethiopia, Rwanda, because of where our companies have expanded to.
And I guess in terms of like investing in the types of the companies, and you mentioned investing in the founders, one of the big topics that there is in Africa is investing in women. I know, and especially investing in women that are in climate.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of funding that is flowing through to the climate sector, and then also women specifically. I guess, what is it that you specifically do to be able to maintain the gender balance? Is it a mandate that you keep? Is it something intentional?
Yeah. So I would say it's not a mandate. So we are not signed up for like 2X. We probably will be in the future, but it just was a timing thing when the time our fund started. But I think for us, conversations like this, being on panels, being a part of women's groups, be it women's WhatsApp groups or what have you, is like how we keep the funnel broad. And then when we find entrepreneurs that we think are really interesting, female entrepreneurs that are really interesting, we track them. We touch base with them every other month. We grab, have informal touch bases or whatever to try to really build that relationship. I think one of our most recent, investments is in a female entrepreneur in climate. She's the head of Abisa, and I think she would agree that we were quite diligent, I would say, in our follow up with her, because we knew she had a good idea, and she had a track record of success, and we just really wanted to make sure we didn't miss the opportunity because we were so busy with something else. So it's a bit of intentionality, I would say. Like once you find female entrepreneurs that, and there I can think of easily 3 or 4 female entrepreneurs that we've been tracking for a while. The opportunity to invest hasn't presented itself, or there's more, we need to see more traction, or, a few twists and turns here and there. But when we do find female entrepreneurs that we feel like are, that are really aligned with our investment thesis, then we do kind of like, I would say we're quite intentional about staying in touch and following up with them. I think right now our portfolio is about maybe 35% in terms of women who are either kind of founders or who are like in the C-suite or very, very senior management, like C-suite MD, for example, and up. Which we are proud of. I think that there's always room for improvement at the board level as well as at the senior level as well. So we are also looking for more female board members when we can find them.
Great. And one of the things you said at the beginning of the conversation is that you're not in energy, you're not in healthcare, you're in specifically agriculture.
That's right.
How do you draw that boundary? Because even from the technology that you just shared in terms of solar drip irrigation, there's an element of technology there, just to help people who really want to apply to the fund to really know and be able to.
Yeah. So I would say, so we have, so tech is kind of used in maybe like 3 different ways. So there is kind of a proper ag tech company,
right?
Where if you remove the tech, you would have no business. Yeah. And so I mentioned kind of Ibiza, which is our InsurTech company. It is it's tech. If you remove that part of it, it wouldn't exist.
Right.
And then you have another level of businesses that are what we call tech enabled. They're made better by the technology that they use.
Right.
So like Farmerline, for example, in Ghana, they collect a lot of farmer data and they're using that to create, training materials, financial products, things like that. Then you have companies that are basically it's Excel.
Right.
And those are companies that are very impactful, but they're not relying on technology in order to improve operations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's I don't want to give a blanket statement like we don't invest in tech. That's actually not true. We do invest in ag tech, but tech looks different, I think, in the agriculture space than it looks in maybe some other sectors. We do have a number of companies that are working through the data that they have, working on predictive analytics, working through AI in order to to create better products. We were just actually helping one of our companies do some kind of voice training in Kiswahili, so that to train their model on how Kiswahili sounds and to be able to be a better generator of high quality training information. So it's not that we don't play in the tech space or we don't invest in tech. It just means that it looks different in the agriculture space. Sometimes it's really hardcore. Sometimes it's really quite tech light. But if the traction is there, if the obviously if the revenues are there and if the impact is there, then we're very happy to move forward with various models and various levels of tech penetration.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool that you are in the agriculture space, but then it also spreads across like different sectors, like the solar space and then like the tech space, and that's always exciting.
Sure.
I guess in terms of back to investments and like investing in women, there are various ways we like invest in women. So there is like having women like yourself in senior leadership at funds that are able to make these types of decisions. We have women founders, women at like board levels, and then we have the women farmers that you are impacting. I guess I kind of just want to understand more of like that gender lens that you are playing at, and the impacts that you're making around that.
Yeah, sure. So we'll start at the fund level. So our fund is a little bit unique in that out of the 7 people on our team, 5 of them are women.
Oh, wow. That's very rare.
And it wasn't necessarily intentional. We just kind of picked the best folks, and it kind of landed at 2 very capable men and 5 very capable women. So we're very comfortable with kind of what we've achieved there. And we're actually bringing on another person soon, and it is a woman. So it'll be 2 out of 8 in terms of guys. So they're a bit in the minority there. And obviously, I think from a board standpoint, we were just looking at this yesterday. We work with the Boardroom Africa as often as we can in order to recruit high quality talent to sit on boards. And then at the company level, we're always, we have a gender action plan for all of our portfolio companies where they have a plan to be very deliberate about, everything from kind of having the right policies in place to support and protect women in the workplace, to making sure they also have the right recruitment strategies in place in order to be able to recruit and retain the best talent. We have also in the past provided grants to our portfolio companies so that they can do gender-specific leadership training. We have also provided coaching for some of our senior-level female management or co-CEOs. And we actually do have an allocation of funding, of grant funding, specifically for what we call gender initiatives. And that is 100% covered by our fund, up to $100,000. And so we've seen companies use that to, just support and retention efforts, quite frankly, and promotion efforts inside the companies to make sure that they not only attract women, but keep them, and those women are also promoted. On the farmer side, this is something that we track very carefully. In general, when we're talking to farmers, so we talk to about 1,000 farmers every year to hear like how things are going with our portfolio companies. Roughly, I would say it's probably like a 65-35 split in terms of who we're hearing from.
Great.
Some business models, like straight farming business models, will lend themselves very well to a 50-50 split. But some companies, like I mentioned Sun Culture before, they're more of an asset-focused business, and a lot of times assets are purchased by the male. So we actually, the male, in the family, and so we hear more from men in that case rather than women. But we do know from visiting farmers and talking to farmers and customers of Sun Culture that women use the product just as much as men. And so what we will often kind of see is that we will encourage our companies, if we do see if we notice that there is a gender imbalance, we'll run the statistical analysis to see, is this a statistically significant difference, right? So it's not just enough to be like, okay, there are more men than women, but like, is this statistically significant? And if it does pop up as statistically significant, then we'll say, okay, we noticed that there is this imbalance here. We can provide technical assistance for you to kind of figure out like what is going on. So could it be that your recruitment efforts are happening at a time when women are getting the kids off to school? Right. Are your recruitment efforts, happening outside of the home? Whereas like the domain oftentimes of women, even for entrepreneurial activities, is the home. And so if you're requiring them to come to like the main part of town, for example, then you may get fewer women than you are expecting. Yeah. So what is it about your process, your business model, that's causing this statistical significant difference? And we've seen cases where even just the gender of the salesperson can impact how many, female customers you have. Yeah. Women sell better to women. Yeah. Men sell better to men. Absolutely. And so if you're trying to fix your gender imbalance on the customer side or the farmer side, you may need to actually take a step back and think about, what does my gender balance look like on my sales team or my sales agent team, because that could very well be where the problem is. Yeah. For example, men will sell you on the cost savings of something. Women will sell you on how we'll make your life easier. Yeah, how will better your life. Exactly. Well. Yeah. And so just having two different strategies for how you talk to and recruit customers can impact the gender balance of your customer base. And so we are encouraging our companies to really think through strategies like that and to work with consultants who can help them think through strategies like that in order to have a more gender balanced farming group at the end of the day. Okay.
Amazing.
Great. Yeah. I think we're almost at the top of the episode, but I think there's so much more that we can unpack here, because I feel like ag tech we're just getting to scratching the surface, and knowing that most of the arable land in the world is in Africa. There's so much that we can do, and how can we leverage this young population, leverage all this amazing resources, and now the financing is finally coming. That's correct. How do we kind of bring all those together? What are your some of your last words that you want to kind of share with a young, budding population who want to come into this space, who want to take advantage of it?
Yeah, I want to add on to that as well. It's like, yes, what young people wanted to come to space, and then also young people want to come into jobs like yours, like the investment.
Sure. Yeah, I think that a couple things. So on the investor side, I think that what is important, so if I'm honest, like everyone's figuring out climate right now and what to do and what not to do. So don't feel like, as if you're a young person, don't feel like you have to have majored in environmental science, for example, in order to be able to contribute to what's happening in the climate landscape from an investing standpoint.
Right.
At the end of the day, climate investing is still investing. And so of comfort with numbers and how businesses work and things like the size of the market and a product market fit and an income statement, and to be able to do financial analysis. Those things are the most important. If you're kind of new in your career and you want to become an investor. If you can find internships, those are great. The best thing that you can do, because we did hire someone straight out of school. She had internship experience in microfinance. She's very comfortable in math and data. That was her kind of background. And she's been brilliant. Yeah. And she's now like a full-fledged part of the team. And so I think she did it the right way, particularly from an investing standpoint. If, for example, you think you want to run your own business, so you're more on the entrepreneurial side, I would definitely say there are a number of startups here. And this is true definitely from Nairobi. But if you can work with a startup for a little while, just to like see how it works, so you don't have the pressure of like money, like I have to like pay my rent. But if you can take some of the pressure off, get a job and perform well at a startup in the climate space, or even not in the climate space, but working at a startup is incredibly instructional at how it all works. And you can see the stressors of trying to make payroll, working with investors, trying to get new customers, so customer acquisition strategies, etc. I think that's an incredible learning opportunity for youth. And I do think that there are more, thankfully, I think the ecosystem is quite strong in Nairobi. And so there are companies that are, very willing to hire bright talent that have an interest in the climate space, or if you want to kind of dip your toe into entrepreneurship, then that's a really good way to do it until you kind of get your footing. Because being an entrepreneur, I worship these guys and these ladies. Being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. There's so much to learn. A lot of it you will learn on the job and you will figure it out. But I think it helps if you just you can watch. Absolutely. And up close. I'm not saying like watch from the balcony, but I am saying watch up close to kind of see, start to get a lay of the land and figure out what you need to figure out before you jump into an entrepreneurial endeavor yourself.
Right, and learn from the mistakes from, I guess, other people's mistakes instead of having to, pay the cost yourself.
Exactly.
I think that's really, really good advice for young people out there. And I would want to start, working a startup just to get a bit of that kind of experience. Great.
Yeah. I guess as we wrap up, any final words that you would like to share for young
especially
people?
about the fund?
Yeah, the fund.
Yeah. So I think about the fund.
On the next cycle?
We're almost done deploying for this cycle. So we have 13 companies that we've invested in. We'll make one more investment, but that'll be it. Okay. But we are also raising another fund. So
bigger, better.
So our first fund was 58 million. Our second fund hopefully will be 120 million. So we are amazing. We are fundraising for that right now, which we're really excited about. Same business model.
Right.
We will just be expanding beyond the 5 countries that I mentioned earlier. We'll be expanding into Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Morocco, Egypt, and Ethiopia.
Amazing.
So there's more work to be done. And we're super excited. We will be hiring hopefully sometime in 2025, early 2025. Once we get some traction on the fundraise. And I would just say there's never been a better time to be focusing on climate. Things are precarious. I think that's the right word for right now. And so we really do need all hands on deck, all creativity, all energy. To be able to, at the very least, maybe slow things down, and in the meantime, kind of shore up the resilience that not just farmers need, but that we all need right now, in the context of a changing climate. So,
yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us. I think it's been such an informative podcast and episode, and I think we really need to have you back so we can talk about all the other money that we need to access, especially when you've raised the 100 million. Wishing you all the best in that new fundraise, and looking forward to speaking with you more. And thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. Please follow Shotlist. Please follow Acumen Fund, and you said ARAF?
Yeah,
ARAF as well. I'm sure on LinkedIn you can get some information on that. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.